I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes. Okay, I'm going to kick this off with something that the incomparable Vivien Goldman wrote about my guest today. The remarkable Lora Logic, several phases ahead as usual, proves yet again that she's the best thing that ever played in the Roxy. The woman defines herself, un-pompously fills a cultural vacuum. If there's a modern dance, she's our Ginger Rogers. Now, that's quite a way with words. But, you know, talking of being several phases ahead, I was listening to Lora's back catalogue and I started to think that those cultural vacuums that Vivien wrote about could be those that appear when, you know, one movement fades, but the next movement hasn't quite formed yet and doesn't really have a sort of genre. Not that I'm a big fan of genres, but that's the kind of exciting experimental phase. And you know, back in the 80s, there was obviously X-Ray-Spex, there was ESG, the Bush Tetras, and Lora's own band, Essential Logic, and they were the ones for me that were always sort of pushing the boundaries and doing things a little bit differently. And Lora's latest album, Land of Kali, which was released towards the end of last year, is this sort of wonderful odyssey that takes us through, you know, my interpretation takes us through the mirror of our own lives into the, you know, kind of the sort of dangerous and dystopian age of Kali Yuga, ultimately emerging with positivity and hope. I always think there are some people who, through their art, through their music, or just their whole being, just make you feel that, you know, whatever happens, that things are going to be okay. So it's a real honor to welcome Lora Logic to this show. And Lora, it's great to see you again.
Lovely to be here, Giles.
So we were saying just before we started recording, you've been back from India about 6 weeks or so. How was the trip there?
Oh,
Where to start?
always difficult to verbalize India because
Yeah,
it's literally like another planet.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so very different. Initially, I didn't really want to go because I've been happy just being here and doing
yeah.
the music and being so busy with that.
Mm,
Sort of making one video after another and all the releases that came from the album. But my daughter said we hadn't been for a few years because of lockdown,
mm,
and I used to go regularly. I used to go every year.
yeah.
So one of her very good friends was getting married out there. She used to go to school in India for 9 months. I was actually teaching English as a foreign language then.
Wow.
All things that was about that was in 2010, 2000.
Yeah.
So her friend was getting married, so she said, "Come on, Mum, let's go. We'll just go for 2 or 3 weeks." And the 3 weeks turned into 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was good to go, and it's good to be back. Although I ended up doing lots of podcasts and
Mm,
lots of musical things out there as well. But it's just very grounding. Uh,
mm,
you know, everything's in your face in India.
yeah.
Birth, death. um, it's nice. It feels very real to go,
Mm,
and it was a good spiritual recharge as well. Uh,
yeah.
Visiting temples, having a bit more time to meditate, to chant,
Mm,
to read. Um, yeah, just to slow things down and be a bit more simple.
yeah. I think that's
Very difficult. It's very difficult to explain India. It's something that you feel with all of your senses the minute you step off the plane. The smell,
yeah.
the just the feeling of the place is difficult to.
Yeah. I mean, I went, oh gosh, it was so many years ago, and I really keep saying should go, really need to go back, but I've only been there once, and it was about towards the end of the 90s. And it was just so, you're right, totally right. I totally get you with that. It was something just something very, yeah, very kind of like visceral arriving, and with the colors, you're right, the colors, the smells, the sound, just sort of everything was really, really incredible.
It's totally different. The sun is
Mm, yeah.
golden when it rises, it's golden when it sets. Yeah, it's amazing. Where did you go?
I was in Goa for a bit, and then up to did that sort of golden triangle, sort of Jaipur, Delhi, and Agra for the Taj Mahal.
Oh, so you would have come quite close to Vrindavan,
Yeah.
which is sort of the spirit. That's very close to Agra. It's about an hour and a half from Agra. It's
Yeah.
about 3 hours by car from Delhi. And
Mm,
that's sort of the spiritual center, the spiritual hub of India. People come from all over the world. It used to just be a small village. It's the village where Krishna was born.
yeah.
And he appeared there 5,000 years ago. Yeah, so you were close to Vrindavan. Next time, go to Vrindavan, even if it's just for one day, you'll feel the special
Right.
atmosphere there.
And I presume you spent some time there on this last visit.
Yeah, I mean, if I go to India, I go to visit Vrindavan and Mayapur, which is in West Bengal.
Mm,
Mayapur is also a special place. It's where Lord Chaitanya appeared. He was an incarnation of Krishna. He
yeah.
appeared just over 500 years ago, and his specific mission, he only lived about 42 years, but his mission was he traveled around India
Mm,
just chanting, dancing, singing Hare Krishna with his followers by foot
mm,
right the way through India. And that's when the Hare Krishna mantra took off, from that
yeah.
time that he appeared. It's been around forever, but he revolutionized that mantra when he appeared.
Mm,
You can read his biography, and that's also an incredible place, Mayapur. So really, those two places. When I visit India, I stay there. That's by the bank of the Ganges. It's very beautiful. It's tropical.
yeah.
Um, and it's more quiet. Vrindavan's become very built up now because Srila Prabhupada made it so popular.
Mm,
Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement, he brought that Vedic culture. He bought the authentic translation of the Bhagavad Gita, which he spent his life translating. He brought that to the Western world.
mm,
He's passed away now, but he
mm,
made Vrindavan famous. So from a small village that was really just covered in jungle and trees, it's
mm,
kind of like a built-up town. But
mm.
you still feel there's over 5,000 temples there.
Wow.
You still feel a very special atmosphere there.
I've definitely felt the spirituality has sort of played a sort of bigger part in my life as I've got older. Um, I wouldn't say by any stretch I'm an expert in any of the faiths, but it feels there's certainly sort of something that it's hard to put my finger on a sort of time. It's almost like it feels like it's been a sort of evolution, where there's the I don't know, it sort of feels like there's something bigger, and I've also started to the past, certainly the past, I'd say probably 5 years, really become aware of the relationship, or the roles that humans have in the in the world, and the sort of position and relationship with nature, with animals, with plants and trees, and this sort of idea of that sort of humanity has, that it's almost like sort of more powerful, if that's the right word, or higher in the pecking order than
Yeah.
everything else that lives. And I've really rejected that theory and that way of thinking.
Well, you rejected the idea that the human beings are, do you mean superior to
Yeah,
other
yeah,
forms? Right.
yeah. I
You're
really think that
right. Yeah,
you know
you're
the,
right,
the,
because
the
spiritually, we just have different bodies. So
yeah,
we're all equal. We're all that
yeah.
same spirit soul, according to the Bhagavad Gita, which is my grounding principle. And I've never
Mm,
encountered a higher a higher spiritual knowledge than that, because it's not about being Christian or Jewish. You may have been born, you know, in a Muslim part of the world or whatever, in a different faith. That's just external. That's just the culture or the faith of that part of the world, or the prophet who appeared in that part of the world. The fact is that that's just, it's external because it's related to the body.
Yeah.
Spirituality means you recognize you're not the body. We're all spirit. We're all spirit. We're passing through. Yeah, that's what attracted me to Bhagavad Gita, because it was so scientific. Spirit souls. And just like we take on new garments, when the old ones are worn out, they got holes in, we put on a new dress. So it's like that. Yeah, sorry, did I digress?
Not at all. No, no. Any digressions are always welcome, because I don't think the digressions. I think that, you know, these sort of things are definitely relevant to, you know, to all our kind of conversations around mindset and sort of what really you know influences you, what inspires you to be, you know, to be the person who you are today.
Yeah, it's been with me really since I was about 19.
Yeah.
I was about 19 and I first met some Krishna devotees. Yeah, it's just, I couldn't imagine life without it, really. I think I'd be lost.
Yeah.
You need something in your life that grounds you, especially as you get older.
Yeah.
All the external things crumble and you realize that they're so temporary. And we've got these big attachments to all these temporary things around us. So, you know, it forces us to become more inward and reflective.
I think that's a great way to describe it. You know, these temporary things, you know, and some of the, you know, temporary you know, structures. I'm not talking necessarily about, you know, kind of tangible things, but you know, kind of ways of life that aren't sustainable, and you know, ways of sort of dealing with you know, with people and with other sort of humans and generally the world. Those sort of things, yeah, I think are definitely temporary. You can see those really kind of like starting to, you know, have such a negative impact on the world that we live in. And I think that's where you talk about that kind of grounding and having something that anchors you as a person.
Yeah, definitely. There's different kinds of yogas. There's different processes for connecting. We're not disconnected. That's the main problem. We're disconnected from source.
Yeah.
In so many different ways. And it's not getting any better, is it?
No, for sure. No.
With you know what? Yeah.
With the way that the world is, yes. So so we actually sort of first met back in November, wasn't it? When you did the live show in you know, to celebrate the release of Land of Kali.
Yeah.
Which is great. How did it? So obviously that was your first sort of live show for some time. How did that? I'm sure you've answered this before, but how did that feel?
Oh, it's taken me 5 months to recover. Um, yeah, you know, it's quite something. I mean, I picked up the saxophone and started making music again when I was 58.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and everything had changed so much in the music world. And then to do a gig after 38, 40 years. I'd actually been on stage with the Raincoats.
Yeah.
And I'd done little things like I sang on the Bow Down Mister single on the TV shows with Boy George. So little snippets of things. But yeah, to actually form a band, and it was a wonderful process. I was working with a wonderful bunch of musicians, and it was a great process to go from rehearsal to a gig. Yeah, and I'd like to carry on, actually. I'd like to carry on doing some live performances, but it was learning what works and what doesn't. I think it was a little over ambitious. We tried to use the videos for Prayer for Peace and Alien Boys, and it was just a small venue.
Yeah.
We didn't really rehearse the technology too much, and then we tried to use stems from the album
Mm.
without enough rehearsal, and then the sound let us down, and so there was technical issues.
Yeah.
But beyond that, the audience were just so amazing. They didn't notice those things.
No, no.
I was dying. I was just dying on stage, but
Oh
some
my.
it was such a loving exchange with the audience.
Yeah. I think I mean yeah, obviously, the video, links and that was there for people to see. But in a way, I sort of I kind of quite I enjoy that. I enjoy it. I'm sure it's not the same for when you're up on stage and there's like all this stuff going on. But for me, it shows that things can go wrong. They do go wrong, and at the end of the day, you're human, and these kind of things happen, and perfection is not always possible, or even maybe kind of desirable. I always like listening to live albums when somebody
Yeah.
sort of plays a wrong chord or it's slightly offbeat. I kind of think, well, that's okay. If they're going to screw something up, then it's kind of okay, really.
Yeah. I guess it's coming to terms with that, because at 58 there's so many kind of like psychological
Yeah.
hurdles to deal with, and recording the album pretty much on my own in lockdown.
Yes, of
Um,
course.
and I am a perfectionist. I'm a
Mm,
Virgo, and I'm OCD about everything. So
right,
the
right.
album for me was I felt like I thought it was pretty perfect because I had all the time in the world to record it, and then Youth came in, and
Mm,
his co-production was perfect. His subliminal, whatever he added, was so right for the
mm,
album. So I was so happy. It was kind of in my little OCD world. It was pretty perfect. So then to go from that to playing
yeah.
it live,
Mm,
um, yeah, it was an experience. And now I know probably approach things a little differently.
yeah.
You know, next time I play live.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the album is absolutely. I mean, it's sublime. It really is. It's a really great album. And I think that that with the musicians that you had for the live show as well were amazing.
Yeah,
Some
they are
brilliant musicians there.
really precious. Yeah, well, Haladar, she played on the album.
Mm,
Greg played a little bit on the album, and Janaki. No, she didn't. She didn't, but she's amazing. She's a
yeah.
drummer. Yeah, yeah, but they're all Krishna friends of mine as well, actually, apart from the guitarist.
Mm.
So we were kind of like, on the same wavelength as well.
Is that the sort of thing that sort of matters to you? To have kind of people on that kind of same wavelength. Does that matter to you more now than perhaps it?
Well, not necessarily, because I think no, I wouldn't feel like I necessarily had to have a band
Mm.
just with Krishnas.
Yeah.
Um, but the fact was we did have mantra in a couple of songs,
Mm.
and we lived close to each other. So for an initial new live band, it was just practical. It was handy, coming out of lockdown. Everyone just lived around the corner, so it was easy
Yeah.
for rehearsing, and yeah, it was
How
it
do,
was
how do,
practical. But I do, for me, no, I don't. They wouldn't have to be Krishnas.
no, no. I was I was
Yeah,
I was more sort of thinking about kind of people who there's that kind of connection. You're of the same sort of mindset, and kind of understand that you establish that kind of rapport. When you're either sort of playing live or in the studio and stuff.
yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah,
Mm.
but I mean, you don't have to be an official Krishna to be on that wavelength.
No, sure.
People are generally I don't know, I don't like using the word spiritual, but
Mm,
I think people are more tuning into, subtle energies now than
yeah.
a few years ago, especially with lockdown and, maybe the internet. There's so many more,
Mm,
much more information
yeah.
available to people.
I don't. I mean, I when I was a kid, I played the cello until I was 17, and then I put it down in a sort of bit of a teenagers. I'm not doing this anymore, and I didn't pick it up. I didn't pick it up for well, probably just until before lockdown, so probably about 2018, maybe.
Mhm.
And I felt like I had a bit of unfinished business with it, and and I did when I was young. I did really well with it. I was, I kind of did. I know you, I, I did exams, so I kind of followed that, and I did exams, and I was a bit resentful of doing it. I kind of felt like my dad sort of pushed me a little bit too hard into doing it, and because I was the only child, um, I didn't feel like I could sort of fight against that. It felt like the sort of spotlight was on me anyway. But so I felt like there was a bit of unfinished business, and so I picked one up a few years ago, and it was amazing just the sort of the memories that came back to me. It was just like, oh my god, it was like I was in my front room at home. It was really incredible. So I bought myself one again, and kind of started playing again.
That's fantastic.
It's a really incredible experience. I didn't
We
think that
know
I would
where to
do it.
come. We know where to come for a cello player.
Well, it was interesting because I mean, obviously, that after kind of 30 odd years, I was so rusty. But the I don't know how you sort of, but the basics were still there.
It's all in
It's,
there. It's all in there.
yeah,
I was surprised. I mean, I thought I wouldn't. It was a tenor. I didn't even have a saxophone. I sold it for a ticket to India like 10 years before. And then my mother actually, she'd taken up the saxophone later on in her life and
yeah,
became too elderly to play it anymore. So she just gave me one. So I just thought I can't ignore it anymore. And yeah, it was very hard, the
mm,
first couple of days, and my lips swelled up and stuff
yeah,
like that. And but now tenor's a bit tough for me now actually, 'cause it's just so heavy for live.
heavy, yeah,
It's like a tank. So I
mm.
just play an alto
An
now,
alto, yeah.
easier.
And what was it like picking it up again, picking up the sax again?
It was great. That's probably why I went to town so much on
Or was
Land
it?
the album, and getting to grips with Garage Band and unlimited tracks, which
Yeah,
I had before. We had 8 tracks and we had 16 tracks, and it was finding a little bit of space to have more than one layer of saxophone was a luxury.
yeah,
So yeah, having unlimited tracks, I went a bit bananas and gave youth engineer a real headache at the end of the day, deciding what to do with them all. And but I had to face the music, and I just had to take weeks off, just bouncing them all down and editing them, which was another
yeah.
experience. Yeah,
Wow,
it was really fun. Yeah, I went to town on this, and I do now. I'm just recording a new single at the moment, and
yeah.
yeah.
And how do you feel? Like about vocals. About sort of the physical act of singing, because I was again when I was a child, I was in the choir at school, and singing it for me, sort of singing in a choir was one thing, and then when I was asked to do any solo stuff, I was just like, oh no, I can't do it. I just did not have the kind of courage to do that.
Um, yeah, you mean it in performing in public? You mean
Yeah, yeah. I used to hate it.
courage? No, it's not natural, is it? I mean, it's a near-death experience performing. Rate
Yes.
rate the same on the heart attack level. I mean, my daughter's an actress and she helps me a lot. But yeah, I'm not a natural. I am an extrovert, but I like to express myself through the music. I'm fine in the studio, but I consider it a personal challenge, like doing podcasts and Zooms. I haven't actually done that many, but
Yeah.
it's yeah, it doesn't come naturally to me. Um,
Mm,
I I think if you can, I think it's a good fear to conquer.
yeah.
Good fear to conquer, definitely.
I mean, this is the thing about it's a good sort of point you make about pushing yourself, the idea of comfort zones and getting out of them. I mean, I think when I started this podcast, I didn't want to do it. I was sort of making every excuse not to do it. It was my partner that was saying, you should do this. I didn't really listen to it until before I started this. I didn't really listen to podcasts that much, and I had to be really pushed. I was like, the usual sort of stuff of nobody will want to listen to me, or no, why would anybody do that? And still, after it was hard to sort of get used to, people saying no to me, and then getting that idea that actually, well, it's probably not about you. It's that maybe it's not the right time for the musician to do it, or maybe they got their own fears of doing it and things like that. It's not all about about me and my worries.
That's so true. It's so true. That's how we should take rejection. It's not,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I don't really bother about it. It doesn't bother me that much now. I think I've obviously got sort of got used to so many people saying no.
Oh, I mean, I'm really enjoying this. I'm finding you really down home, and I feel very relaxed talking to you. Uh,
Yeah, that's good. Oh, that's a good. That's a result for me anyway. Definitely. So, if we going, I know going back to when you were a child. I'm sort of interested in your, sort of like the thing. If you can sort of pinpoint your formative influences, things that really because I find when I'm thinking back to my child, there are certain childhood, there are certain things that I really remember, good and bad, that have sort of formed me, who I think I am as a person now. Going back to your childhood and those sort of formative influences, what sort of sticks out for you?
you mean before the age of 15?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I was just always attracted to anything out of the box.
Oh yeah.
I lived in sort of suburbia, and
Mm,
my mum was a teacher and my father was an accountant, and
mm,
I guess that's what the song Brute Fury is about.
yeah,
Brute Fury, they couldn't find the answers, and my empire cried. So,
yeah,
just looking at your mum and dad, and mummy's got a headache, daddy's got a temper. Just there's got to be more to it than this.
mm, mm,
Learning to break out of, like so many other um, punks maybe that emerged around about that time in 1976, 77.
yeah,
Just to break out. Well, every youth generation wants to break out in its own way. Um, yeah, so being attracted after school, I'd go and see the Lindsay Kemp mime troupe, or I used to look for the most subversive alternative things I could find because I went to school in London, so it was easy for me to hop on the tube and just go
right,
to Soho Theatre or try and find some really alternative performances. I was always attracted by performing, and I was toying with the idea of being an actress, but then I went to some part-time drama school classes and realized I just couldn't hack the sort of the pretension and the
mm,
competition and the favoritism.
mm,
Just with teenagers, but there was always one or two that were the favorites of the teachers, and I just couldn't hack that kind of posy
yeah,
vibe. Yeah, so it was easy for me when I saw the advert in Melody Maker, Young Punks. One, it was like there was an allurement coming from those words, and
wow.
yeah,
I remember that.
Quite young. I was only 15 when I
Yeah.
turned up the audition.
I mean, I was like my equivalent, I guess. I was brought up in a town called Chorley, up near just a bit north of Manchester, and it was a kind of typical sort of northern market town. And I used to, when I first got interested in in music, I remember used to going down to the local record shops, which were all independent then. Mostly independent. Certainly in my town, there were 3 or 4 independent record shops, and I used to just love going down and looking at. I remember that certain record covers, that really sort of stuck out at me. There was stuff from like Susie and the Banshees. There was, I think, the sort of first Adam and the Ants album. There's the sort of Killing Joke stuff, and it was it was just the artwork then that you kind of had to go on, and it was almost like you were going into another world.
Mm.
It was a world that seemed far away, completely different to my existence at that sort of time. And there was something about that just that difference that was really sort of attractive, but I never did anything about it.
Well, you did take up the cello,
I did take that up, yeah.
and now you're making up for lost time.
Yeah. At the time when I'd sort of picked the cello up after a few years, and I'd sort of discovered some of these bands, I wish I'd taken up the guitar or something like that, but it wasn't to be.
I've taken up the guitar as well. I really do. It's just, actually I bought a guitar recently.
Did you?
I've got time to practice it, and I never realized I have so much respect now for guitarists. So I never realized what a difficult instrument. Sax is a piece of cake compared to learning the guitar. Your fingers hurt, and got to do so much cerebral stuff just to be able to play a few chords.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would have liked to learn the guitar as well. No, it's all right. So many I would have.
So many I would have, yeah. But I mean, the sax is a phenomenal instrument, though. I mean, it's so amazing, so kind of evocative. The sax, I love the sax.
I guess that's what attracted me to it. It's almost like the human voice, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the human voice. Yeah. It's I think that's why I liked it. I heard David Bowie play it, and it was there in Roxy Music, and they were 2 of my favorite bands to listen to. And I thought it'd be different. I didn't know another girl that played the saxophone, and yeah, just had to be different.
See, that's an interesting thing in itself. So I was the same with cello. I didn't really. I mean, apart from a few, couple of others that were in the orchestra at school, but I didn't. None of the people that I hung around with, my friends, were into the cello, would play it. So again, it sort of felt like I was different in a way, and I was a bit of a there was almost like a kind of red light surrounding me that was saying this guy sort of plays the cello and things like that, and I didn't want that. I didn't like that.
That's it.
Didn't like that attention.
What did you feel like? You're a bit of a freak because you play a classical instrument like the cello?
Definitely.
Yeah, I guess you would do at that age. Yeah, I remember in school, like girls that played the violin, or they were square.
And it was a big thing, so it wasn't exactly like you could sort of stick it in your bag. Sort of carrying around this big hulking thing on your back.
Imagine after school, look at him. What's that on his back?
Brutal. And and the thing, and I also I played a lot of football as well, and then and quite often the things would clash. you know, if I had a sort of football match, and then I had you know, kind of cello practice and things like that, and always started to get, you know, as your interests grow as you get older, you expand into different things, and then things start to clash, and it gets that bit of tension, doesn't there?
Yeah, it's not enjoyable, and the way that they teach these instruments in school normally is uninspiring. Yeah.
Did you find that?
Yeah, well, my mum, she grew up on a farm in Finland, and she never had the luxury of doing anything extra. She didn't even go to school till later on, because she was needed on the farm, and so she valued education, and she very much wanted me to learn a musical instrument when I was growing up. So I went through all the usual ones, violin and piano, and probably I would have liked them, you know, if it hadn't been taught in that very pedestrian way. Grade 1, grade 2, and practice 15 minutes a day, and you're always on your own playing the instruments. Yes, I wasn't interested at all. And then she said to me, you know, what would you like to learn next, after I'd given about 4 of them up, 4 instruments up. And I just said saxophone, just off the top of my head, really not thinking, you know, that I'd get one, because they're big and expensive. But then my dad did buy me one, because he loved the jazz saxophone.
He was into jazz, wasn't he?
He was into jazz, and that's all we had playing in the house, with Charlie Parker and Stan Getz, and I heard it all the time. I thought it was really boring at that time. Since then, so they got me one, and somehow or another I really took to it, and I just played 5 hours a day, and I really wanted to get to grips with it.
Were you just like, when you were practicing on your own, were you just literally just, you know, kind of playing free form? You just wanted to, you were just basically kind of experimenting with it?
Not really, no. I played along to records, vinyls that I had. So I worshipped David Bowie. I wanted to be David Bowie. Didn't just want I wanted to merge into him, and so I had all of his records, and I played along to them. And musicals, I like musicals like South Pacific and rock and roll. I like those 50s sax riffs in the, you know, Bill Haley and the Comets. Really liked all that 50s sax stuff. So I played along to records, and then I had a few lessons from a jazz teacher that my mum found me. I had a few lessons from him, and then X-Ray-Spex came along. It all happened quite fluidly, really.
Yeah. And how did it fit? I mean, I'm maybe saying, you know, a few minutes ago about, you know that you were really attracted to things that were sort of outside the box. So did that, you know, when that kind of advert, when you saw that advert and that chance to, you know, to get into that scene came around, did that sort of feel, again, quite a natural thing for you to do?
Well, I hadn't really seen many bands live before 1976. I'd been to one Hawkwind gig. A free Hawkwind gig in Harlow Park, and I bought a long cheesecloth skirt for the occasion.
Brilliant.
Saw that. That was a good gig. And then I went to one David Cassidy concert and one Osmonds gig, because I live near Wembley Stadium. So there's bands playing there all the time. Sorry, what was your question?
It was about you were saying earlier about that you were attracted to things that are outside the box. So like when the advert appeared and then the chance to get into that scene appeared, did that feel quite natural?
I loved it. I mean, you know, when I just rang up the advert, Falcon Stewart said, well, we're not looking for a saxophone, but come along anyway. Black Punks wanted, and Polystyrene answered the door, and she was like an apparition. And I always say this, but we were both wearing the same clothes when we met.
Wow.
We were wearing like 50s pencil skirts and stilettos and sort of tweed secretarial jackets, which nobody wore at that time. We got them from vintage charity shops. We got those clothes from. and we were both wearing, they're practically identical. So it was like a dream seeing her, and we just on so well from that very first meeting, and she was giggling, and it was fantastic. I felt like I'd always known her, really.
Yeah.
I think I did know her in a previous life. I'm pretty convinced.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty special when you know, you're kind of making that I guess kind of like big sort of change in your life. Maybe I don't know if you realize that at the time, but obviously with hindsight, you know, that's a huge sort of change for you, and then you establish that kind of like immediate sort of connection.
Yeah, it was a total change. I mean,
Yeah.
school went out the window. This was it. I was
Yeah.
free. I met polystyrene. I was free. Yeah, and yeah, we started rehearsing, and you know that was the feeling of punk when it
Yeah.
arrived. We were free. Nothing
Yeah.
else was important or mattered, or who cares?
Was there was there I mean, obviously there was a sort of, you're amongst a community there, but was there a with that community, was there a kind of um what's the way to like a kind of strength in that community that kind of like emboldened you all, you all emboldened each other to you know, to kind of follow your instincts, or was this just kind of like just sort of a natural kind of happening?
Um, it was. I mean, it was quite complicated. It was happening on so many different levels, and it was happening so quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I saw it, it all emanated from the Roxy Club
Mm,
in Garden. That was the hub, the meeting place for the, you know, first band of punks.
mm,
Bands were playing there, the Clash, the Pistols, the Slits, those early bands. And the excitement was incredible from those. There weren't even that many gigs. It was only open 3 or 4 months, I think. It closed in April, didn't it? It was only open a few months, that club, but it, you know, it really changed the course of musical history at
yeah.
that time, because it spread like wildfire. All the kids from outside of London
Mm,
came flocking to London. Even had one boy that came, and his uncle he was underage, and he came to an X-Ray-Spex gig in Hope and Anchor in Islington, and he just ran away to see X-Ray-Spex, and he was very young, and his uncle was a CID police officer, and he
mm.
came and he wanted to arrest me after the gig because I'd lured his little boy away. So that was the effect that, you know,
My
punk
God.
had on the.
You were the original subverter.
Well, there's quite a few of us. I wasn't
Yeah.
the only one. But yeah, we were just bathing in subversion.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you know, yeah, people came and they saw the bands, and then they went back and formed bands themselves, and
Mm.
it was all very organic and spontaneous. Um, what was your question?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I guess it was whether that you know, community that you know, both sort of amongst the band and then, you know, other people that were around you, sort of you kind of that togetherness kind of like emboldened you to just create and just do things.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't feel that much togetherness. I mean, there was a lot of rivalry as well between
Yeah, of
a
course.
lot of childishness amongst those first punk bands, and
Mm,
bad drugs, and like Ari Up, she came and she pulled the electricity out. I think it was our first or second gig at the X-Ray
mm.
Spex gig at the Roxy, and she pulled the power out, and Polly wanted to kill her. I mean, I laugh about it now, but it's not like we were all fraternal.
Yeah.
We were just young, you know, young, and but yes, there was the mood of anyone can do it. Anyone can do
Mm,
anything. You don't need to play an instrument. Half the audience used to be on stage with us.
mm,
Everyone felt there was a sense of equality,
mm.
of rising up, and it was a revolution, you know, it
Yeah.
was a revolution in the industry, creatively. Um, yeah, you
It
know.
was. I guess I remember maybe was it last year? I think it might have been last year that I was talking to Alice Nutter from who's in Chumbawamba, and you know they kind of famously lived in a squat in Leeds, and you know they started around about 82 or something, 83, something like that. But she was saying that feeling of being in a gang, and it was them. I mean, they were quite. I mean, they were in that sort of collective. There were people coming and going. So there's maybe 8, 9, 10 of them or something like that. But that kind of feeling of being in a gang was, she said, was really really empowering. Because we just all their money sort of went into one pot. So they used that for kind of the housekeeping or the squat keeping or whatever. And I guess it's that kind of gang, if you want to call it that sort of mentality that
Probably you
yeah
find that more in smaller towns
yeah
because there were less punks or whatever word you want to use.
yes, that's true.
You probably would have felt it more then. And yeah, I lived in a squat land in Stoke Newington for maybe nearly 3 years.
Mm.
And yeah, within that framework, there was a sense of community. Stuart Moxon from Young Marble Giants, he used to live downstairs in the basement, and yeah, and we went to another squat, and then Cherry was there before she was famous, and yeah, it was like I'd say that's true because we didn't have social media, and
Yeah,
it was and Rough Trade was very strong community.
of course. Yes, that's a really good point.
Yeah, the independent record companies, definitely they created community. I mean, it was kind of Jeff Travis used to come up to me and say, "Oh, do you want to go and play with the Raincoats today? And do you want to go and tour with Red Crayola
Wow.
and go and play on Dennis Bovell's new album?" And it was just there was that musical community atmosphere.
God, I mean that all sounds like just kind of that spontaneous, thing like that where feels so far removed from how it is today, where everything's kind of got to be planned and it's in sequence.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very really a happening scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember on one of in my first series, just thinking about the importance of kind of like physical environments. I remember one of my early episodes, Jessica Louise Dye, who lives in New York, she moved into New York. She said that New York, I'll never forget this. She said New York became the fifth member of my band, and it was almost like the influence of the city was so strong on her that it couldn't help but be kind of shape who she was and who the band was. And I guess that in in that time, the London scene was so revolutionary, as you said.
yeah, yeah. I was very busy because really from the minute I formed Essential Logic just a few months after I got kicked out of X-Ray-Spex. And then I was so involved with the band and gigging. We were always doing something. So I guess coming into contact with other bands was mainly at gigs. The first Stiff Little Fingers tour, so the first Rough Trade tour of Great Britain. So I got to see bands that we played with, really. Or when I went to Rough Trade, there was hundreds of bands coming in Rough Trade or who had singles released by Rough Trade. So, but I wasn't so aware. I mean, that was my world, I wasn't so aware probably democratically, what's happening. And we toured Europe, so I knew there was a lot happening in the European cities.
Yeah.
And they had such a great, I've always found in Europe, touring Europe, they have such a great appreciation, probably more of a cultural appreciation for music on all levels.
Yeah.
So they would listen to the music so deeply and ask really deep questions about the songs afterwards, which I'd never even, I couldn't even go there. It was to my head span, just was spinning, just hearing the questions. So, but there was so much more happening. I think there was more happening in people's heads because there was more time to think.
Yes, that's true. That's really true. It's really true. I definitely like that. I think I must be European because I mean I love, when I listen to music, listening to sort of whole albums, the entire album all the way through. And I know that the world now is much more about kind of singles and playlists certainly in the, I guess, perhaps more in mainstream music than in than other music. But I like listening to the whole album because I like to try to understand or get my own interpretation of what's going on. What that whole thing means to me.
That's what we used to do. That's what we used to do. You get a new David Bowie album and it's a whole journey.
The whole journey.
Artwork and everything about it. Yeah, that's what it should be.
Because I mean, presumably, when you're putting the, like your 12 tracks, about how to order them, there's a thinking, involved in that. I mean, for example, how do you approach that, for example?
Yeah, I think on the last album, there was definitely, I mean, a couple of people said, "Oh, you're calling the album Land of Cully. That's a bit." Cully technically means it's an age. We're living in the age of Cully. It's the coral. It's a bleak age. It's a dark age. Out of the four ages, Cully is described as the Iron Age, quarrel, hypocrisy. The leaders are but swindlers and fools, and we can see around us. So yeah, people say, "Why do you want to be so gloomy?" And call the album Land of Cully. So there was a lot of thought behind that.
Yeah.
There's darker songs like Cully, which was just realistic. It was recorded in lockdown.
Yeah.
There was a lot of very dark, sinister things about lockdown, which I don't think anyone could disagree with.
Yeah.
And songs like Alien Boys, that song's got many different levels to it.
Yeah.
So there's the darker songs, and then Serious, which is about a personal meltdown. And when I did leave my body, and I thought that was it, that was like a death moment for me.
Yeah.
But then there's very bright, so there's like the dark side, and then there's like the positive side. So
yeah,
it ends, there's Prayer for Peace. It starts with Prayer for Peace, Polly's song.
Yeah.
Incredibly positive. And then the last song is very positive, Beyond.
That was definitely the way that I interpreted it. That was definitely my interpretation. I'm sure other people would perhaps interpret it differently, but definitely that kind of goes in positive. There's the kind of darker, sort of more sinister, perhaps, if that's the right word, and then kind of coming out at the other end, which I think is overall very positive.
Well, it's feeling. Nice to know that you picked up on that as well.
Definitely. I really did, and I enjoyed those kind of journeys that an album takes you on. Kind of singles are very good. The I don't like saying this, but like immediate gratification, if that's the right word. But the album gives you a fuller picture.
Yeah. I think. It's really true. Yeah, singles can be a bit out of context.
Yes.
Sometimes and then you wonder how they relate to the artist or what's going on
Yeah.
at a particular time. We've got a remix album planned, which should be out in a few months' time, which is something else. It's a remix album of The Land of Cully.
Amazing.
So excited about. I mean, we've got people like Adamski
Yeah.
and I better not give too much away.
No, don't give too much away. Adamski's great. He's brilliant. He's so good.
Yeah, he's totally on the Land of Cully channel. So very excited, really excited about that new album. So I didn't have much to do with it. I mean, obviously they took the stems from the original album, but what these individual mixers have done is just like blows my mind. I'm so happy because I feel it's on the same channel. It's on the same Essential Logic channel, but what they've done is just really out there.
Do you know, this is really interesting because there was the band A Certain Ratio did brought out an album in 2020, I think, and then did a similar thing, a sort of remix album, and the feel of it. And I think that I was talking to Donald Johnson, the drummer, and he said, you know, basically the remit was just, well, there wasn't a remit. Just go and do your thing.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. Some of the distance between the original and some of the remix versions is it's miles away, and it's incredible. But I like that idea of reinterpretation and almost the songs being living things that can grow and change.
Absolutely. I mean, with modern technology, sky's the limit. Just take one riff, just take one line of a song, and you could spin it off.
Yeah.
100 different ways. That's what people do, isn't it?
So when talking a little bit, maybe if it's okay, about, you know, kind of self-belief and you know, kind of like how it felt after, you know, forming, you know, Essential Logic, you know, about how you dealt with, you know, any, you know, about forming Essential Logic, and then lastly kind of coming back into, you know, into music. You know, were there any sort of doubts that you had, if that's not sort of too personal a question?
What you mean at the age of 58?
No, or even no, but back with, you know, Essential Logic, you know, when you first formed Essential Logic back in, what was it, 82? You know,
No,
after
it was in 79.
sorry, 79. So after leaving Specs, and then you know, did you have any sort of doubts about, you know, kind of self-belief and doubts in forming it, if that makes sense?
Well, it wasn't really a planned thing, you know. I mean, I was just approached by somebody called Jeff Mann who said, I packed it in. I didn't want anything more to do with the music business after I was kicked out of X-Ray-Spex. Very bad taste in my mouth, and I felt very hurt. And so I had I put my sax away. I hadn't played it for months, and the only thing that I was vaguely interested in at school was art. I used to spend my time in the art room.
Yeah.
So I got a place in art school, and I went to art school, and this chap called Jeff just kept sort of hunting me down, and he said, look, you were the best thing about X-Ray-Spex, and go and make a record. I'll pay for the studio time. My father's got a record label. And so after being hassled by him repeatedly, I just thought, okay. And I went home and wrote Aerosol Burns.
Yeah.
And didn't think too much about it. And a few minutes later, we were in a very nice studio in St. John's Wood. I found an X-Ray-Spex band, Stuart Action, to play guitar. The first drummer from X-Ray-Spex, he'd been kicked out because his hair was too long, Rich T, who ended up staying for many years with us in Essential Logic. I think originally actually a secret. He was in Queen like a long time ago.
Wow.
Yeah, before Queen rose to fame.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was great. And the bass player, Tim Wright, who also lived near me. And yeah, so we recorded Aerosol Burns, and I didn't think much of it, but Jeff Mann took it to Jeff Travis at Rough Trade, and he went bananas about it. And then and that was it. So then I just joined the Rough Trade family, and Jeff kept saying, okay, right, now you're going to do an album, now you're going to do some gigs, now we're going to put you on the first Rough Trade tour of Great Britain, and then, you know, yeah, one thing led to another, and
Yeah.
it was fun. But no, I did feel, yeah, I mean, I'd never really sung in my whole life before, and from having been a demure saxophone player in X-Ray-Spex to writing songs, managing a band.
Mm.
I was only 17, 18 when I formed the band, and doing all this, yeah, and singing. It was, but it happened so fast that I don't have time to get mental about it. I
Yeah.
just went, and everyone else was doing it. You know?
Yeah. I guess at that age as well. I mean, I think back to, you know, when I was, you know, kind of 17, 18, you know, handled things, you know, or at least sort of bounce back from things, from, you know, kind of setbacks and, you know, things that don't go your way, probably much easier than I would do now. Well, in fact, definitely much easier than I would do now.
Yeah.
If that sort of thing, I mean, obviously, I didn't experience it, but from what you said, you know, at the time, it was hurtful. I know that if that sort of thing had happened to me now, it would be, yeah, it would be tough. But back then, you're just a bit more. I don't know if maybe more resilient. You just kind of bounce back a little bit quicker, perhaps, and if it's happening quickly as well.
Yeah. 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 Um, I was just shocked that anyone would want to have me write a single, or I never thought about it. I never thought about doing my own band, really. I never
Yeah,
thought. I was happy just
yeah,
playing sax and X-Ray-Spex, but I'm glad, you know, I would never have done that if I'd stayed with X-Ray-Spex. Well, I might have, because X-Ray-Spex didn't have a huge longevity anyway.
yeah, yeah. True.
Expanded quite quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's
What's
easy.
what sort of role as instinct, you know, kind of like your sort of gut instinct played for you through your life?
Um, well, when I was younger, you know, when you're younger, you just do. You don't
Just
think.
do.
You're like a bull in a china shop, and you just do, which I think's got its advantages quite often. But yeah, as you get older, intuition has does play a big part in my
Mm.
life. Um, you know, meditating and chanting, and
Yeah.
because I feel connected. I feel connected internally, whereas I didn't even think about that stuff when I was younger.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a voice. I think there is a voice which you can learn to listen to.
Yeah.
And when I was recording the Land of Kali album, I started out with nothing. I didn't have any recording equipment. I didn't have any songs really, and I relied a lot on intuition right through lockdown. I had
Yeah.
faith that things would fall into place when they needed to, and I
Mm.
became very insecure sometimes because I just thought, I'm investing so much time in this, and it felt like starting from scratch. And people had said, yeah, they'll help, but then I wouldn't hear from, like I was supposed to be working with an engineer, and I wouldn't hear from her for months. And then,
Mm.
yeah, and I just thought, but no, I need a connection in lockdown. You know, that isolation, I think it affected everyone on many levels.
Mm.
Have enough connection in your life. So I learned to rely on it, I think the most on intuition in lockdown.
To help you with that insecure
Yeah, because
those insecurities. Yeah,
yeah,
I understand. Yeah,
3.5 years into recording the album,
yeah,
and it was like I was in the fog a lot of the times. I didn't even have a computer when I started it. I had to learn GarageBand and I had to learn everything.
Everything, yeah.
That record in 2020, 2019, I had to, yeah. And it was, of course, when you get older, everything's a bit more of a challenge as well. But I had faith. I just thought, I'm going to throw myself into this and then leave the rest up to the angels.
Yeah, I completely hear you with that. I mean, it was that about sort of 2018, I was going through quite a lot of change myself. Sort of with how I was feeling, what I wanted to do with my life, and it's those. I guess it's that sort of liminality, isn't it? When you get into those sort of feelings of, okay, I'm not sure what's happening here. I don't know what it is. It feels uncomfortable. What do I do? Do I stick with it? Do I basically sort of use because my sort of personality, how I've tended to operate, I guess sometimes I tend to analyze things, but I have this intuition, an instinct that's also working as well. And that sometimes creates this sort of tension where my instinct is telling me one thing, but then I'm like, oh, hang on, you need to think about this and that. And sometimes it's like, it's so frustrating.
I think a lot depends on motives as well, like why you do things. And I think if you do things for good reasons, then it's easier to make decisions and recognize people or opportunities when they come your way. It's easy to, just to make decisions. If you're doing things true to yourself and for authentic reasons, I think it's recognizing your own nature as well, doing things that tally with your own nature.
Yeah.
You like to do, you're normally good at, or you can become good at them. Even if you're starting out with nothing, no faith or indecision, or I think that if you follow your psychological nature, then it's easier.
Do you think also that your personal values, kind of, are motivators for that? Sometimes those decisions as to which route you take, or should be those motivators.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so important to have some kind of rock, some kind of values in your life. I mean, otherwise it's just eating and sleeping and wherever your mind takes you, and the mind can take you so many places. So yeah, I mean, I really learned a lot of discipline. I think your goals have to be bigger than your problems and your anxieties. You've got to have something to jump out of.
Yeah.
Or in the morning to get out of bed. You've got to have something, whatever it is. And yeah.
I think I think that, like, my values, I'd like to think those are the things that have probably stayed constant through my life. And I learned a lot from my dad. Because through his values, he in particular, he was more open about kind of what he sort of strongly believed in. My mum less so. I don't doubt her values, but she was less vocal about them. My dad was the one that, back in, when I was a kid, we would sort of sit and talk politics. We'd talk about what's good in the world, what's bad in the world, and things like that. And that sort of stuck with me. So I think those values are the thing that has stayed constant with me. My identity has undoubtedly shifted. what's important. What you mentioned goals, about what my kind of goals, or what I want to do with my life, but the values sort of stay with you, don't they?
Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely. And I think if you can, if you're lucky enough to have other people who share those same values,
Mm.
gives you so much strength as well.
I think when there's so much uncertainty in the world as well, it's kind of important to have those that can almost like be your sort of guiding principles.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Mm.
We all need association. We all need, even if it's on the internet sometimes, but we need like-minded people for sure.
Yeah, which again sort of brings us back, kind of like-minded people brings you back to that idea of community, doesn't it? And finding people that you can relate to on whatever level. I think
Mm.
now, more than ever, I don't know, it just sort of feels like it's kind of more important, whether we're just becoming more kind of detached. It's hard to know, isn't it, whether what sometimes what the reality is it me changing as a person as I'm getting older, I'm feeling things different. What is the reality? You get into all sorts of existential problems, don't you? Or at least I do anyway.
Yeah. No, but I relate to your point about community. I always had this because I lived in communities, Krishna communities, when I was
Mm,
22, 23, 24. And that was some of the happiest times of my life,
yeah,
just to be living so simply uh, in community. Um, on a personal level, I'd still like to do that,
mm,
at some point. I've always had this idea, of living on the land with cows that weren't exploited, cows that were protected, and you know,
yeah,
simple, grow your own veg, and then yeah, and what else? What do we have to hand on?
yeah,
Imagine if there was more communities. You've got
yeah,
something solid to hand over to the next generation.
yeah,
And I think it's very much needed. Things are crumbling on
yeah,
levels around us. What to speak of the food chain? Can't really trust. You can't trust the food anymore. I think it's so
mm,
natural to grow for people to small is beautiful. To grow their own food and
totally.
all that. So
I agree entirely with that. I agree. I mean that that life that you've just sort of just described. I mean, I think that of our sort of personal attributes, if you want to call it that, something like emotional intelligence, and kind of what that brings. I think is hugely important for for everybody, to kind of have that, and I'm just sort of continually surprised that it's not taught from an early age, about what it means to be empathetic, to have self-awareness. And you can see how it takes generations to filter through. But that sort of lifestyle that you kind of described, I mean, that must have been, kind of like an integral part of that style of living.
yeah, yeah, it was. And to start the day, like we started the days with chanting, dancing, and singing. I mean, what a way to start the day, you know,
Yeah,
to connect with the divine, whatever
yeah,
to give the divine, but to feel without any doubt that you are connected by getting up early and, having those early morning spiritual practices. And then whatever else you do during the day, kind of, you know, you have to be practical. Everyone does their different work, but
mm,
nothing is as important as that initial connection that
Yeah.
we had. Well, I mean, I still do that. That's
Yeah.
still I don't get up at 3:30, 4 in the morning because it's not practical for me to do that very often.
Mm.
But I chant every day, and I try to stay connected.
To connect.
But without that, I think, well, what's the point? What's the point of anything else? Because what have you got to give?
Yeah.
If you're disconnected, what have you got to give to it?
I agree with you totally. That's a really good point. Well, tell me what else you've got coming up this year. Then this year on the kind of the music side, what else have you got coming up?
Ooh. Well, we've got a new single from the Land of Kali album
Yeah.
that coming out in a couple of weeks' time with a lovely and amazing new video. Just I can't praise Kavi Karanapura too
Yeah.
much. She's genius. Have you seen some of those videos?
I have. Yeah. Yeah.
Skyrocket and Alien Boys. I mean, that Alien
Amazing.
Boys is a killer. He just pulls them out. He just pulls them out. And yes, so the new single's coming out a couple of weeks' time. I won't say the title of it yet.
No.
With the video. And then we got the remix album coming out. And I've been invited as a guest of honor in about 10 days' time. In Leicester, there's a exhibition. It's called Punk Rage and Revolution.
Yeah.
And it goes on for several weeks. I think it's Arts Council funded, and it's a celebration and an exploration of punk. So I've been invited to cut the ribbon to that, and I'm excited about that.
Wow, amazing.
I need the practice. Yeah, so there's that. There's a single. There's a remix album.
Yeah.
Some gigs, hopefully.
Brilliant.
Yeah, gigs. And another new single that I'm recording, which I'm so excited about. It's another X-Ray-Spex song, but it's going to be very different.
Wow, amazing, exciting stuff.
Yeah. So I just feel very grateful, really, that the universe and the divine has given me these opportunities. It's a bit of a struggle sometimes, energy-wise, to do all this, but yeah.
Do you feel like you're sort of doing things at your own pace, or you're kind of like in charge of, how quickly you do things, or what sort of sequence?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I pretty much, I have the most incredible help from an angel called Kurt Pagan Davies, who took this box set project and the new Land of Kali album project on, and he's been my interface with Cargo Records, and he helps me so much with so many things. But yeah, I go at my own pace, and
yeah,
it has to be like that.
It does.
I'd crack up if I had some weird manager putting me in strange situations.
Yeah, well, those sort of like in post timelines and things like that. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah,
it's better to do it at your own pace, and on your own terms, for sure.
I've never had a
for
manager.
sure deserve that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the whole. Obviously, these days, especially, you need help with communication, and it does help if you've got help with social media and things like that. But I've always managed my own musical affairs. Had no choice, really.
Yeah.
I never had the man with the golden tooth.
Well, I mean, you've done an amazing job with it, and it's honestly, I mean, it's so good to have you back, and producing this great music. It really is. Like I said at the outset, you know, it's kind of it's sort of like there are, you know, there are some people out there that, you know, I think just through their kind of like, you know, the type of energy that the positivity that they sort of give off, that always sort of make you feel things will be all right. Things will be okay. It's true. I honestly sort of feel that there are some people, some, you know, kind of musicians that I see, because you know, music has, for me, has such a kind of power to, you know, to sort of to influence, you know, the way that it influences maybe different, but it still has a lot of power. And you know, just the energy sort of behind that music, it's a it's a kind of life force. It really
Yeah.
is. And there's an energy there.
I've always felt like a channel, pretty much. I mean, singing and playing the sax, and I've never really thought too much about it. You know, I mean, melody and a lyric and a rough idea, but it's so exciting when you just see yourself as a channel and the record button goes on or whatever. And you just feel the inspiration comes down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're not the controllers. In the ultimate issue, you know, we're controlled by everything. We don't even know what's going on in our own bodies. Don't
Yeah.
even know how we're digesting food, you know, but we think we do.
We think we do. Yeah.
We're the controllers and we think we know everything. But you know, if you just open yourself up and you let down some of the mental barriers, then you know, sky's the limit.
I mean, that actually would have been a great point to end. But it's a really good point you make, though, about that, you know, about mindset, about having an open mind and being, you know, having that, yeah, just that kind of open mind to letting things happen, you know, not being sort of too set or sort of forget what the word is. Anyway, you know, kind of too set in what the outcome may be.
Attached to the result.
Attached to the results. Yeah.
That's the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita. It's a way of thinking, it's a way of working. It just makes, you know, total sense. You do what you can. Everyone's been given different gifts, and you do what you can, but you don't get disturbed. If that's what yoga means, it means to be equipoised. So if something doesn't go the way that you want it, or you give it your all, and that is a success.
Yes.
You
Yes.
don't fight for the sake of fighting, Krishna tells Arjuna,
Yeah.
without considering happiness or distress, victory or defeat, loss or gain. So then you're peaceful.
Yeah.
You've done what you could, you know, and you leave the rest up to whoever you want to call him, Krishna.
Because that, yeah, I mean, that, you know, that way you won't be disappointed, you know, if the, you know, if the outcome doesn't, you know, you're not focusing on the outcome.
Yeah.
And it's about the, and I remember I was learning the drums. Dave Barbaros was teaching me the drums. So he's a good friend of mine, and he said, because I had a tendency to rush the drums, and he'd say, just trying to get me to slow down. It's about the journey. It's about the journey for getting there. It's not about the result at the end. It's just about the journey. Enjoy it and go with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very true.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the fun bit. You don't know how it's going to happen. You don't know what's coming next.
Yeah.
But you know, you feel that reciprocation of other forces making things happen, and that's the excitement.
Yeah.
Not what you can control.
Exactly. Lora, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been amazing.
Yeah, it's just been transcendent.
Wonderful. I'm so glad we've got to talk. And yeah, it's been a real It's been a really great chat, really real education for me. Thank you so much.
For me, it's been very inspiring.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.